How's it going, guys? Hope you're doing well. My name is Max Crone, and this is Estate Mate. Today, we get to speak with a very insightful realtor in multiple markets. So, with that being said, Greg, really glad that we can make this happen.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah,
Excited to be here. Excited to dive into some stuff. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, let's start off with how and when did you get started into real estate?
yeah, I've had a bit of a twisted road to enter this. I actually started off as a musician, French horn player, classically trained. Did my master's in Florida, and then came back, and I decided that I wanted to get into playing jazz, which jazz on the French horn is not the most sought after of positions. So I kind of burned some of the classical bridges to really chase after what I wanted to do. And but I was happy with it. I was had some odd jobs and stuff like that. I left the college teaching position in Florida, moved back to New York, and get right in the thick of it. So I did that for a while. We had a little quartet for a bit, creating my own stuff, and then at a certain point, it's a very hard thing to make money at, even when you're just the music industry's changed so much, and then to couple that with being a jazz French hornist that there's no positions for jazz French hornists available, so you have to create your own. And then I was working some odd jobs too. I had a bartending gig, and actually I was switching from like one hotel. I was looking at a bartending to find another one, and I answered an ad that said, tired of mixing margaritas, and I go, well, yes, I am. And it happened to be like a real estate thing. And I go down there and I like prepare like a resume because I think it's, like it's a serious job or whatever. And I get in there, it's like a boiler room. It's just nothing but this big room of phones. And, the guy didn't ask me one question, never looked at the resume I prepared. I just quickly realized that like if I could, speak and walk and chew gum, you're hired. And I'm like, what the hell kind of place is this? But I got my license anyway, and then I found a company that kind of resonated with me a lot more, and I stayed with them for a long time. I mean, for real estate, like agents typically bounce around all the time. I would threaten to leave probably like once a year after maybe the first couple, and then he would always the owner would come to Greg, sit, come. What do you need? What can we do? It was that kind of environment. So I wound up with them for quite some time. But it's kind of weird. But like some of the skills, like you wouldn't think like music would have any real skills that would kind of translate into real estate, but it does in a way. Like from depends on what you look at. Like there's a lot of sharks in this business where they're like, just hard sell. Like you're just jam this thing down their throat. Like you won't leave until they sign at the dotted line with the highest, like that's not really my approach. But what I found from music is, it kind of made me a great listener because I sit in rooms just listening to myself,
Listening and fixing what to change,
hours. What's that?
listening and fixing or figuring out what to change, and then how you can apply that to real estate, listening to them and maybe doing something a little bit differently than you did it last time, something like that.
Well, that's the other part, the creativity part of it. I love. I mean, that's the essence of jazz. You're always like making something up. So I really kind of love that, and it's kind of been a double-edged sword for me because like creativity is great, and you could do so many more things with it, but at the same time, if you're it kind of lends you to be really good at doing hard deals, which the bread and butter super easy things are just fantastic when you get them. But I tend to have I tend to work with a lot of problems, and I mean that was one of my first sales. I sold something as a buyer to this guy, to his son. Excuse me. And then he goes, Greg, I got this issue. Maybe you can help me with it. And it was this condo. They kind of were default investors. They had invested in the building. This is in like 2000. It's right before the crash. So I basically got in right as everything tanked. So fantastic timing for real estate.
Yeah.
But so these guys, they wound up with like 7 or 8 units in this condo, and he had the penthouse, which the roof was leaking because as the developer was going up the building, they ran out of money, and they just started cutting everything. Like you're just missing more and more stuff as you get to the top. And then the roof leaked. The developer actually bailed. She ran off to Florida trying to get out of the country. They caught her in Miami, wound up in jail for fraud. And these guys wound up stuck with like 7 units. And this one,
You said that this was your first deal,
this was
or one of?
it was on the early side. It was probably, I had a couple like easier ones than that.
Okay.
So, but it was like maybe 4th or 5th.
Oh my gosh.
Side. But it's probably a blessing in a way, because I was too naive to realize like how hard of a deal this would be. The building's in default. There's no banks that will finance it. The roof leaks. There's a tenant in there that won't let me show it. I had to sell this like dream of, this is gonna be great someday. Not now. It's terrible right now, but it's gonna be great someday. And I managed to sell that one, and then I sold like the other 7 from these guys too. They were like very happy. I found some creative solutions to kind of workarounds for I found a bank that didn't care how many units. Typically, one of the red flags for financing is if there's more than, I forget the exact number. It might be 10% or 15% of the units are in default on their maintenance. That's like an instant red flag for a bank. And they're like, I'm not touching this, won't lend in the building, unfinanceable. But I found a bank that's like, they would base it on, we're trying to find a way, they love money. It was, if you're really well qualified, you bring over some money to their bank, they're like, yeah, you're great. We'll finance you. We'll put it on our books so we don't have to sell it in the secondary market, and we'll go do a deal. So I sold most of those were financed, I think, through that bank, or maybe a couple other ones as like we started to clear the building and get like some of the problems out of it.
Mhm.
But that kind of like, it's kind of interesting to have like some real crap deals to start, because it just makes you so much better at it, because you get like a bread and butter, simple deal, and you're like, dude, it's easy, come on, the bank will finance the building. Oh yeah, this is what you do this all day, come on.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you said that was your first couple of deals. Do you think that has helped you kind of set the tone for the rest of your career, or do you think that like, you've always kind of been like that, creative, and like you mentioned being creative, but do you think that amplified your creativity for the rest of your deals?
Yeah, it definitely, it kind of helped me realize that there's a channel for it. It doesn't have to be, everything just, because there's a lot of that in real estate. And particularly if you work with, like, say you work with Wells Fargo, right? They're great in some ways. They're a big box bank, but if you bring them anything outside of like their parameters, they're like, "Oh, we're not touching this. What kind of crap is this?" No. And it's not like necessarily that these people are like underqualified or something like that. A lot of times it's just a weird thing in the building that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't fit in their little box. So I kind of got very good at just finding other solutions for stuff like that too. And yeah,
Okay.
I think it definitely kind of spiraled into some other things. Like my wife actually, So I started in 2008. She opened a PR company in 2016, something like that. So that also kind of like gave me a different vantage point for creativity, and it kind of gave me a very interesting. It kind of brought a different light into real estate in general. Because you look at like, why is this restaurant so freaking busy, and the other one that's like right next to it that's pretty much seems more or less the same thing? Why is that so empty? And it kind of comes into that same stuff with real estate. It's all perception. It's all supply and demand, and how to create that demand, how to make something be more attractive than everything else in the market. And once you kind of like put that stuff together, that's where it gets really interesting. And it's
Yeah.
not, people don't always think like that. They tend to like, oh, well, this is the market value, this is that, right? Look, people don't buy things, especially now. It's you get into like the market now. I work in New Jersey and New York City, and I've been a bit more focused in Jersey because I moved a little further out, and that's kind of where a bit more of my business is coming for at the moment. But and
Okay.
it's still crazy. Since the pandemic, it's been nuts. Like just bidding wars all over. Yes, the interest rates kind of slowed
Very much a seller's market still in your
down.
area.
Yeah. And I feel bad for these people. We set up an open house, we'll stage it, we'll do it, we'll get everything. So it's like as good as we can get within the budget and parameters. And, first weekend, people come in and they have like, so we'll run 2 open houses on it. And you look at it from a buyer's perspective, it's like, look, I just spent 30 minutes in this home, and now I'm forced to make a decision by Tuesday because we already have offers and the highest and best is due on Tuesday. How much over asking I want to spend? And it's, I feel bad for some of the buyers. It's just kind of a nutty thing.
Are
But the reality
buyers ready
is
for that? Like, do buyers know going into it that they're gonna have to, spend over asking? Or is that something that you have to kind of break the news to them every time?
well, the reality is that your first time buyers, like most of the first offers that people make don't get accepted because they hear all the news and they go, oh, I'm gonna go get a deal. Look at this thing. It's like, this is 800,000. I'm gonna come in at 7. The sky's falling, real estate's gonna crash. Let's do it. And then you get there and there's like, tons of people there. We got like 80 people that day. And they start going and you tell them, look, we got some offers already. If you want it, you're probably gonna have to come strong. You're gonna have to come solid. We'll help you. But so, I mean, it's one of those things is most people miss their first deal or two. It's gotten much better. If it was like last year, or the year before, it was like terrible. It was so hard to get a deal done for buyers. I mean, it's great for sellers, but now we're like starting to see some of that stuff come back. You can get an inspection. You can get, I mean, back a little bit ago, it was like, oh, you have
ask for it.
Over asking, you have to waive the appraisal, you have to waive the inspection and just bite the bullet and hope in those 30 minutes of you looking around this house that you really are not qualified to actually know if it's a good house or not, made the right decision.
That's wild.
That stuff too, it leads back to that. Like in that scenario, these people are not making a rational decision. I mean, I'm not saying that like that. It's like you're
like at the fault of, it's not their fault.
No, and I'm
It's
not
just
saying
like,
it
it's
in a
just
rational.
it's just how the market is treating
It's
thes properties
it's
almost.
kind of forcing you to make a bit more of an emotional decision. Like you're not going in a rational. I mean, it is rational to a certain extent because at the same time, right? I didn't see this when I was looking at when COVID happened, and I was like, yeah, I bet we're going to see a migration out of the city. we're going to see the suburbs pop. But I had no idea it would be that strong. And it totally kind of took me by surprise. And I was looking for some Airbnb properties in the Poconos. My wife were like, yeah, we should go get an Airbnb. We'll go buy a house. We'll do it up. We'll rent it as an Airbnb. I bet, we're not going to see as much people traveling internationally. We'll be able to kind of, but I'm looking at the prices there, and it's like, you look at what it sold for last year, and then you look at what it sold for, what it's asking now, and I can't do it. I can't do it. It's double. That's insane. But
yeah, and last year was still pretty hot, wasn't it?
yeah,
In your area?
I think like Pennsylvania's probably coming back down. Like that's
Okay.
the rub on it, right? It's, you talk about what the market's doing, but it's so specific now. It's not, can't talk real estate market at all, because there's a lot of markets like Jersey, it's going up still in certain things. Even inside of that, there's exceptions. Like that town might have more discounts, but the prime ones by the train close to the city for people that like, I mean, I think the way we commute now changed it a lot too, because it's, if you had to be in 5 days a week, you're like, I can't handle that much of a commute 5 days a week. But if I only have to be in 2-3 days a week and I could work remotely 2-3 days, not so bad.
Yeah.
So like those very commutable properties are really going.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to see. I mean, it's such a crazy, it's crazy out there. I mean, with the Fed, he just keeps raising the rates on it, and then you've had all this stuff with like First Republic Bank and excuse me, like Signature
SVB.
Bank and things like that going under. It's, you talk about these, they've raised it so fast that it's really put a lot of pressure on a lot of different things. Not so much in the residential, but particularly commercial is where it gets kind of tricky on that stuff. Because those, for an investor, you're always making money in the spread. Most investors are not just buying everything. Like, I'm gonna just throw down all this cash and just buy it 100% cash. A lot of times you're leveraging because you make better returns by leveraging. But the higher the rates go, your spread gets narrower and narrower. And at some level, I mean, you're looking at investment properties, the values are calculated by the returns. So if the returns are sucking because the rates went up, then yeah, we might see the prices come down too. And complicate that one further, you have all these, the commercial loans are typically not like 30-year fixed. A lot of times they're balloons, so we'll have like, we'll do a 10-year arm and balloon payment at the end, and you just keep kicking that thing down the road and refinance. Not a big deal until maybe it is a big deal. So
do you see rates slowing down, or do you see those kind of, I personally haven't been too in touch with those in the last, half a year. Do you see, like, what's your kind of outlook on that? And maybe compare that to what you think it should do.
I think, I mean, my biggest problem with it is I think what they're trying, I mean, the problem is the Fed only has this one lever. That's the only thing they could really screw with. But, ultimately, does that one lever actually help what they're really trying to do? That's the rub. A lot of times I mean, it's the same thing with government. It's always like that. You've seen this a lot, especially in New York lately. You get a lot of these like feel good kind of laws. They're like, oh, we're going to pass this law for all the tenants and it's going to be wonderful. And then you inadvertently screw so many small landlords that, like, Yeah, like you're gonna get stuck if a tenant doesn't pay in New York. They're looking at a year before you can evict them. It's
So that's like something like the squatting law or something like that, or so they can stay there for maybe how long before they have to pay? Is that you said a year before they?
well, it could be like a year to get them out. They changed the law in 2019 about that, and then during COVID, it was even worse. I mean, you just couldn't. I mean, granted that's like an exception. Like there's a fine line between doing what's right and helping people, and then it just depends on who's picking it up. It's because it's easy to look at it like, oh well, all those big landlords, the Silversteins, the, all those giant landlords, the Rudins that own half the city, the Relateds, they could afford to cover this. But at the same time, there's a ton of mom and pop landlords that they have a mortgage on this property. Now all of a sudden they got no income coming in. They got to fund
Mhm.
their own stuff plus pay for their tenant. And some of that
Yeah.
for years. It's nuts.
Yeah, we actually have something like that in our area, not necessarily for long term, but more for short term properties like Airbnbs and VRBOs. We live in a very touristy county, and there have been towns that have put ordinances on Airbnbs, so the people that live here can live more peacefully, and also be able to live here, like so we're staffed, because we get a lot of tourists anyway. um
Have they've kind of put in a law where you're not allowed to rent Airbnb now, or you're like only under certain circumstances, or
that's in New York or
yeah, New
Jersey.
York is like that as well.
Wow.
They pass it. Well, they've been in a battle in New York for a long time, and the city want for New York, they want the hotel tax. So
Yeah.
the hotels really lobby and to try to drive
Mhm.
Airbnb out. I mean, and
That makes
don't get me
sense, I
wrong,
guess, but it's
but you
like,
have some of that where you are as well, like certain regulations about what you can do, if you could do it
yep.
under certain circumstances.
So there wasn't too much regulation a few years ago when so my mom got into it. um so for context, my mom and dad, they split, and then she couldn't afford the house just by herself, like with her nursing job. um so what she did is, like, she was like, well, how am I supposed to, we had it listed at one point, but for some reason this was like maybe 2015, and for a while it like nobody, like, there's zero interest, which is kind of crazy looking back,
Yeah.
but then uh yeah, she discovered Airbnb. This was probably 2018 or so, and she's been Airbnbing her property ever since. But ever since then, every single year they've been more and more strict. So this year, I can't remember the exact ordinances and what they entail, but she is only allowed like one group every 7 days. So if she gets like a booking for 3 days, she can either cancel it and hope that it gets booked for 7 days or 6 days or 5 days, or she could just have those 3 days booked and then wait another 7 days for, I think that's one of the um the
Yeah,
details. And
yeah, it's a tricky one.
it,
There's a lot of, and
yeah,
that could really wreck your income. I mean,
yeah,
especially if you're
absolutely.
able to book like that long. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's I have
It's
friends that
crazy.
are in New York City and they have a lot. They have some Airbnbs, and it's been a wild ride on some of that too. And
Yeah.
it's kind of tricky because there are people that are like, people that like just like your mom, just trying to make ends meet, trying to like, and why not, right? But then there's other people that like totally abuse it and like,
Mhm. I
really
s- I do see
shady
both
stuff.
sides. I definitely see both sides because there are a lot of places in the county that are understaffed, and there are people in the county that have, or like Facebook posts. I see Facebook posts every once in a while. Hey, um, like, does anyone know of any apartment under like $1,200? And for here, that you can afford a pretty, traditionally you could afford a pretty nice place for $1,200, but they can't find like almost anything, so they'll move to um Green Bay, Wisconsin. um and yeah, they'll sometimes commute, sometimes they'll just live their life in Green Bay, and will be understaffed. So I definitely see both sides. um but yeah, it's just selfishly, it's kind of unfortunate sometimes, but you know,
Yeah,
things like this
I'm a
exist
huge
for a
fan
reason.
of Airbnb. Actually, I really I like the concept. It'll be kind of interesting to see how it's going to play out over the
Mhm.
years. 'Cause and it's that same kind of thing that I like about it. That it's like you look at like some of the traditional things. Like there's people that just like randomly put their house up, right, and they they just did it as they had it. Like wow, whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love yellow, so I painted the whole house yellow. Enjoy. But that's
Yeah,
not like what most people like. So
that's true.
there's still a lot of room in that to really stage things. It's the same kind of thing. Like you
Mhm.
got to create the experience for them. You got to like walk in and they feel like, wow, this is cool. I love it. So
Mhm. So speaking of, so where are you taking this
yeah,
call from right now?
I'm in my we bought an Airstream as a kind of pandemic project. Real estate was shut down in 2020. They, like New York, they were like, you guys can't work. Just I don't know what you're supposed to do, but don't do it. And my wife too. I mean, she has Thailand clients, and you can't be traveling. It was like luxury hotels in Thailand. Like she had like 3 or 4 of them, and it's like they're all gone. The restaurants all kind of. So it just sounded like so much stuff shut down. And then yeah, we found one of these. It's a 1968 Airstream, and we bought it, started renovating it, and now I actually have 2 of these. Uh, the second one, it's not quite done, but yeah, we have. This is the. I'm not. It's not really going to show well on my my
No, that
lap.
looks nice. So how much did you put into it? Like what'd you all do?
Um, we picked it up for about 7, and then we had to do kind of we had to rip all this stuff out, the stove, everything, the stove, the fridge. We kept some things because it was kind of like half done. Um, so we kept what we could to kind of like keep some of like the charming details, like some of this stuff, like
Okay.
the and things like that,
Yeah,
and
it's cool.
then kind of just went and just kind of like try to give it more of a modern look because like some of these things. The other one was even worse. It had this like 1970s shag carpet that it was pretty much had the color of puke. It was like this
Ooh,
orange yellow kind of mess. And I was, oh,
yuck.
so we've gutted that one. We're leaning towards maybe doing I have a friend of ours that owns a restaurant. He's one of the best bars in Jersey. We're going to try to do it as a mobile event space, uh, polish it up, and kind of like sell drinks for events, and have it as a cool backdrop and things like that. So, but I have
That's cool.
a lot of work to do on it. It's so hard to find good people to help with it too. Like we had my wife's cousin helped out a lot. Um, we had a guy. We hired a guy for a while. Turns out he was a heroin addict. So that didn't end so well.
Wow.
But yeah, I probably would have been better off buying a house and doing it as Airbnb because I had no idea like
Okay.
how difficult these things are to renovate because everything has to be custom. This is all curves.
Yeah.
Everything fits, and it's like half the stuff's from 1968. They don't make the parts anymore. It's like,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's
That
a
sounds
really
hectic.
cool, interesting space. So
Um, so do you currently rent it out?
yeah. We have
How,
so we have it on I'm on a tree farm. So we live on the other side of the houses over there. But we have a 27-acre tree farm
huh,
that we have it set up. There's a stream behind me over there. So you can it actually used to be like a natural swimming pool. So you would just block it off and then turn it into a pool. We haven't redone that. My wife uh, doesn't love the idea of swimming in a stream. It's gonna be snakes and things.
oh,
Like, but it's so cool. It's so weird and different. I'm like, you gotta do that. But I have,
interesting.
I have not. I mean, we have enough other projects to do, but so that one can get sidelined for a while. Let's see.
How close is that to the place that you're in right now, the airstream that you're in?
The stream, you mean?
Yeah.
It's like literally behind me, probably 50 feet, something like that.
Oh, nice. So is that something that your tenants, like your guests can use or like do or
Yeah, we
explore?
have. Well, I mean, they could go. There's not much to do there at the moment. There's like
Mhm.
stairs that go down into the stream, but it's just a stream. We don't have it blocked off, so it's not.
Okay.
It's full of rocks and sand and stuff that is just
Mhm.
washed in there over the years, and we haven't cleaned it out. It's really just a stream, but they can
Okay.
hang out by the stream. It's kind of cool. You hear the water at night.
Yeah. Yeah, that does sound pretty nice. So what do you rent this place out for? And how, like how well does it work out financially?
Well, I mean, we just started doing this. Basically, I mean, I think we're maybe 2 months in,
Oh,
at,
okay.
so we just finally got it going this
Mhm.
spring. So we're the per night average is pretty decent. I think we're about it's like 140 to 200. It is
Oh, okay.
figure
Yeah,
out
no, that's
I think to
pretty
come
good.
whatever. Which, judging from some of the other like uh, Airstream rentals, I think we're actually doing really well on the per night. But we get
Mhm.
mostly just weekends. We haven't, we also have
That
some things
makes
we have to
sense.
kind of work out too. Like I think I have to reposition it, and I have it kind of set up off grid at the moment. So there's a water tank in here that we have to tell people like, just so you know, there's only 40 gallons. If you take like a 30-minute shower, you will have no water. So I have to kind of reposition it where I can get it, I can run water and septic to it. Just
Okay.
station is not, but it was close to the river, so we were like, so yeah, we're still kind of figuring them out.
Mhm.
But that was
What's
kind
your
of the thought originally, was like set up like a little mini Airstream campground. But I'm thinking of taking the second one and turning it more towards the the mobile bar because I think the profits will be better on it. You could just
okay.
make a lot more
Yeah,
money on bars, to be honest. So.
that makes sense. Um, so what's your goal with investing? Are you going to continue to buy these Airstreams, or do you want to get into more of like single family and maybe
Yeah, I think
multifamily homes once the market corrects?
the next one's going to be single fams or multi-fams or some. I would love to find like a nice multi-fam that we can do Airbnb at, like something a little
Okay.
different, but had has a couple of units. That would be kind of more my goal. And I'm yeah, that's kind of more the direction. I don't think I don't know. We'll see. There's still, if I could get this a little more, a little less work, um, then I think we might go with more of these. But the problem with the Airstreams, especially like a vintage one, it needs a lot of explanation, and you wind up with a little bit more hand holding and like, yeah, I have all these videos of like how to do this, how to do that, how to do this, but people don't always watch them, and they still ask, and so
Do you put those videos right on Airbnb, or how do
I,
you? Because I was under the impression that you couldn't put a link in there in the like in the description.
no, yeah, they like Verbo lets you do videos and put,
Oh, okay.
but the Airbnb, yeah, there's not, they're not as friendly with links.
I f- I find that to be so weird. I
I
don't
think
know.
it's partially though that they want to make sure that you're not like, you're not using Airbnb to generate the business and then switching them to your personal website where you don't have.
Mm.
I think that's more
Oh, okay.
their thought process on it, to try to, people trying to save the thing. But for me, I don't really want to do it. I like the extra insurance of Airbnb. It gives me a little bit more security on it. So
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I'm happier on that. But yeah, you can send links after they book, so you could just message them links to, we send them some stuff on Instagram, we send stuff through YouTube, and
Okay.
you can check it out. Like you can send, like we send a Google Doc of like recommended, here's stuff you could do. Here's uh kayaking, hiking, all that kind of stuff.
That's smart. I like that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it helps in some ways. I mean, it definitely helps. It's a lot easier than trying to explain all that stuff. They
Mhm.
most of the time they're very grateful for it too, because we're not such a destination for um for tourists. I'm about an hour and 20 minutes outside the city, but it's not the Delaware River where people know. But there's a lot of great hiking, and there's farms. I think we're going to do really well in the fall. There's so
Okay.
many farms out here, and people love to come and like pick apples and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Like a little pretty vintage Airstream would come stay, and I think we're going to do really well.
Yeah. I've definitely looked into Airbnb an Airstream. My sister and I had a little plan to go to California, and we were like, how do we make this, like, we're both uh in school, and yeah, we're pretty tight financially. So we were like, there's this camper, and I think it was an Airstream, and it was like $70 a night. I was like, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it has a very big draw. Me being like at one point a potential consumer, like customer, consumer, whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Um, what's your goal? Like, what would your overarching goal be with real estate? Are you trying to replace your income as an agent? Are you just doing it for fun right now, or do you see it as a means of, retirement? What's your situation there?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I would love to. So I kind of inadvertently got into doing teams in real estate, sort of by accident, because my wife, she has these resorts in Thailand that she does PR for, and they send her out. She was there. We would travel to Thailand about once a year, and
That's
we'd
cool.
stay for, you stay in this gorgeous like 5-star resort. You're not paying anything.
Wow,
It's
that's
fantastic.
wild. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And so we would tend to stay a little bit longer. So like, and her gig is, she owns a company. She can do it from anywhere. It really doesn't matter. She's got clients in Thailand and Maldives and Texas and California. So it's like all over.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, like getting more into that mobility, that is kind of my goal. And the way to kind of do it would be either, or if I'm doing traditional brokerage, to do it more on a team basis where I'm generating enough leads that I could toss it off to somebody else to execute. And that's generally what I've been doing for New York. I have a small team there, and I'll get the listings and then do all the marketing, do all the back end, do the pictures, and then he kind of does a lot of the showings because to be honest, I'm quite far, and if I travel like an hour and a half and somebody stands me up, I might kill somebody. So it's
Mhm.
not fun.
Yeah.
So like that side is getting more towards that team aspect, more towards pulling myself out of it a little bit more. And because the
Like partnerships and doing things with you know, maybe creative financing, or what would be your purpose of, or what would be the reason of doing teams? Maybe bigger deals or what?
it's a way to leverage. I mean, it
Yeah.
all comes back to leverage. I'm not trading time for money in it as much. I don't have to do the
Okay.
showings. I can have somebody else do those for me. I can focus more on the high level things that I'm really good at, and I can, put somebody else that's much better at certain things to it. Like paperwork is not it's kind of my nemesis in some ways.
Mhm.
So like the more I can toss that off to somebody else, or have somebody do the showings, um those kind of things. And
Okay.
then the same kind of thing for like you were saying, for like the Airbnb or for investing, it's the same kind of principle. It allows you to just leverage your time a bit more to really create that. And I would love um to kind of get more towards that, where I'm able to create enough passive income on it where I don't have to do anything. But Airbnb is deceivingly less passive than your traditional real estate. I've done it
Yeah.
once. I've done it like I had an Airbnb and we rented it for. I mean, they took it for like a whole summer. It was fantastic. I had to do nothing. We were just there
That's yeah, that sounds
and they paid, a decent amount. I made a decent amount on it. It was like fantastic. But like the shorter terms, and particularly for these airships, we're still. If I think the more systematized you get it, the better that is. But
mhm.
I'm still trying to figure out the. A lot of times you just don't know it until like you're in there. Like,
Mhm.
oh, that was a problem. Yeah. Oh, I should have thought of that. Never
Yeah.
like those kind of things that kind of come up.
Yeah. And people think that it's very or very black and white, like passive and active income. And but I'm a very big proponent of like pretty much everything existing on a spectrum. And even with my mom's Airbnb, if passive is over here, active is over here, this is the middle. It's like I don't even know where it lies. Like I would probably say it's more active, just
Yeah.
because she's sometimes she's doing the cleaning. She normally has a cleaning lady, but um as of recently she had um some medical thing that she had to take some time off for. So now the cleaning is on her because she doesn't have really a backup. So she'll clean with one other person. And it's like at that point, she's in constant communication with the guests. She's cleaning for the guests. Um and making sure it's or ready for the next guests, and like after she cleans it, does all the sheets, um all of the, yeah, like literally everything.
Yeah.
um so it's like how passive really is that?
Yeah.
But
It's
if you
not
want
always
to,
so passive.
yeah, but if you want to make it more passive, yeah, you can just make sure you have a cleaning lady, backup cleaning lady maybe, and then and outsource communication, with the actual um with the actual
There's a
guests,
lot
and
more
it's
companies
crazy.
in that space now too. But
Hmm.
I think that's where the economy of scale kind of comes in as well. So if you
Yeah,
have, it's very difficult for the one-offs. Because it's what do you try to find
yeah,
somebody to come in and do this one thing, but it's ultimately it's not a lot of money. It's just like a little bit here and there. So it's the more you have, like that's if you grow, like say if I took this and I made like a whole campground, we actually went up with like 6 or 7, then that economy of scale works a lot better because we're able to get the staff to kind of
yeah.
run
And
it.
one person could manage one property, or one airstream for, let's say, $100, just for simple figuring.
Yeah.
And then if you have 10 airstreams in the same exact location, that
Yeah, it's
same
not costing
person,
$1,000 to have
exactly,
it.
yeah,
It's definitely, yeah, the economy of scale really works in your favor on
yeah.
that stuff. So, and then it just becomes like you have your own little hotel, which is
Mhm.
you know uh,
That's very cool.
interesting. And
Yeah.
I really like the service aspect of it too. I mean, not to get like
Mm.
I like it and I don't like it, but I like trying to
Mhm.
set it up for people where they really, to do something special for them to really make them feel good about it and really enjoy
Mhm.
staying. And I think that's kind of the one interesting thing about Airbnb too, is that, typically you have people that are there to have a good time. They're not like, you know, they're not your traditional tenants. So they're on
Mhm.
vacation, like, everything's good. Yeah. Just,
Yeah.
don't screw it up too bad. But the more you can kind of set it up in a way where they do those little extra things for them, doesn't cost you a lot of money, but like for us we have a little fire pit out there, we give them wood, we bring them little marshmallows, stuff like that, so they have s'mores. We
Mhm.
kind of just give those little things to kind of help sell it.
Yeah.
People seem to be very appreciative of that.
I'm sure people appreciate that quite a bit. Shifting gears a little bit, back to agent life, or whatever you want to say there. So another relatively selfish question. So for beginner realtors, let's just say someone just started doing their education, what bit of advice would you give them, for those who are just starting out?
Like how to get well.
Like something that you wish you would have known when you were starting out.
Well, all right, I'll give you that one. That's an excellent, very potentially expensive lesson that I've learned. Especially in this market, it's changed so much since I started. You wouldn't think like 15 years ago, it's like, yeah, so what? It's not night and day, but the world has been changing so fast. Everything has been flipped on its head like 10 times in the last 15 years. But it went from, you could have been a lot more of a generalist in real estate to really being that neighborhood expert. And I think that was probably the biggest mistake I made in it. So I started off, I did those units that I was talking about, they were in Harlem, in East Harlem, and I would do a ton of work in Harlem. I didn't live in Harlem, but it was an easy commute. I happened to have, I had good connections. I was marketing there, and but I didn't keep up on that. I kind of switched around a bit more. The one thing I would say is to like kind of really, there's something to be said for being that neighborhood expert, for really staying in that niche, and the compounding factor over time really makes a difference. It's always difficult to start. Like switching markets is one of the hardest things in real estate, and especially after you've been in it for a while, because it's like you don't want to have to do all the same crap that you did when you
Mhm.
started, because there's a lot of stuff that you would
What
do
goes
because
into that?
you're
So like,
humble.
just searching a lot of, numbers, and trends and establishing relationships with people in that community, all of
Yeah.
that kind of go into it. What would you add
Oh, what would I add?
to like the list that I just kind of
Okay.
described? So like, mhm,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like having those numbers at the top of your head where you're talking to somebody and you know it so well, it's such an advantage. And that comes like, if this is my niche and this is what I work and this is what I do, and you just know it inside and out and nobody can do it better. That's a great advantage. Um, but yeah, I would say that's one of the things I probably should have stayed. I moved around a lot. I started in Ireland. I wound up doing a lot of stuff in Brooklyn with investors, and then um, I kind of work with a lot of investors. So the investors kind of take you to odd places because you're always chasing great returns, and what's the next hot spot, what's the next thing
mhm,
that's going to blow up, and you hit certain thresholds, and like East Island was great for a while. We like, especially after the crash, you'd sell these things, and in like a couple of years they're like cashing out hundreds of thousands of dollars on
mhm,
their investments, and then they were taking those and going into the next up and coming market, which I really like because I really just like the investor mentality. Um, but yeah, like in a way, I wish I would have just stayed a little bit more local on that. I probably would have. It would have made my life easier and probably more lucrative.
okay. So stay in one location and kind of be the absolute expert in that location.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that, but at the same time,
Mhm,
life changes. Like you're not.
yeah.
I was living in Manhattan. I didn't have kids at the time, and I moved to Jersey City, and then like my neighbor below me is like banging on the ceiling constantly because I come home and my son's happy, he's jumping up and down, and I just feel like such a jerk going to my son, stop jumping. You're like, it's not like he's so happy to see you, and it's just kind of it was kind of weird. So we wound up moving to a house and kind of trailing out. It's tough to say that. Life
Mhm,
changes, you change with it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
but I would
Have
also say like having that path of where you want to go and just really like, having that vision of where you want to be and what you want to do in the business. And it can change too. I mean, it always changes. Like,
mhm,
'cause you have to pivot. There's so many things that like you think like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna launch this campaign, and they're gonna go nuts for it, and I'm gonna dominate that niche. And then you start doing the marketing for it, you start doing that, and like it's completely not what you thought, and you have
yeah.
turning.
I've experienced a lot of that. Um,
There's a lot
within
of
my own
shiny
business.
objects in real estate, so it's
Yeah,
dealing with that.
yeah. I had a really good follow-up question, but I completely forgot. Yeah, I can't think of it right now. It's kind of escaped me.
Well, I
Um,
got a little distracted on the original question anyway. So
that's all right. It was some sort of follow-up. Anyway, um, let's yeah, so oh, it was about content, sorry. So, do you think content is um like semi-important, very important, pivotal, not important at all? And yeah, what are your thoughts on? I know that you have been putting a bigger emphasis on building your brand. What do you think that's kind of done for you?
I to answer that first part of do I
Hmm.
think it's important, not important, it used to not matter so much, I think, like, but this real estate industry is kind of really strange. Like there's people that just been doing the exact same thing for 30 years, and they're just working their sphere, and I
Hmm.
send out postcards. Has my face on it. I get this giant dumb billboard with my face. There's one in Pennsylvania that just cracks me up. It's this woman on a bill. I forgot what it says, but it's just her like pointing from the billboard. It's the most hysterical looking thing I've ever seen. And there's so many weird things you can get kind of trapped down. But yeah, I do think content is king right now, because I've gotten people that say to me like, oh, we were going to sign with this other agent, but they don't really have a social media presence, and you do, and
Wow.
we'll go with you instead. And
Yeah.
I think there is, like, I've seen it from Airbnb too. Like when I post stuff on Airbnb about like I've seen a real return off of that. I'll see spikes when I run some content on it, and then like back to nothing when I didn't. So it's kind of interesting in that. So I think there is, are people really buying things on social media? Maybe. I mean, there's definitely some of that, but I think it's definitely something that you can't ignore, and you have to try to do it in a way that's a little, staying on top of those trends, to be ahead of the curve, and not just do the same crap that everybody else is doing.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it's really important.
Nice. With that being said, uh, do you? I have this theory that I don't know what the word is. Maybe some sort of philosophy that I heard of. It's like you should have an understanding of your why, like why do you do things, why you have motivation, why you get up in the morning, whether it be non-energetically or very enthusiastic and ready to tackle the day. What's
Yeah.
your why?
Uh, I mean, my why comes from my family, and to, like, why I would do these things, to be able to spend more time with my wife and my son, and to kind of, that's really the driver of that stuff, and that kind of changes why I would might, like I was talking about for the real estate, to be more that team leader, where you're not making as much on it, but you're taking a smaller piece of a bunch of things, but you can be there with your family. You can go travel. You can, uh, just allows you a lot more freedom. That's
Mhm.
that's really the big driver of a lot of stuff. And
Okay.
I really love to travel, so my wife is even more so. She gets so itchy when she's like home for any length of time. It's always, as soon as she gets back from somewhere, she's booking her next trip. Honey, you gotta relax. I gotta go to work, okay?
That's funny. Where's your favorite place to travel, whether it's with that one-off trip or it's a place that you return to every once in a while?
I probably Thailand.
Mm,
We would go almost once a year. Pandemic, we kind of took a few years off. Just, well, one, they weren't open, so
mhm.
that was a little harder. But I mean, my wife's also from Thailand, so she still has some family there too. So, but yeah, I that's probably my favorite spot. You can go,
Okay.
it's evening out a little bit more, but it used to be you would go there and everything's so cheap. You could go have this like amazing dinner, like literally on a beach. You go like pick out your fish, they grill it up for you, they bring it to you. It's just so cheap. Um, Now like it's kind of evening out a little bit more, the pricing, but it's such a
It's still a good deal. What we would see as a pretty good deal.
it's a good deal, and it's just like, you go
Mhm.
to like a beach in Thailand, and it makes you never want to go to the Jersey Shore again. It's just kind of
Yeah.
really
Wow.
cheap for some of these things. It's like this
Mhm.
one hotel she used to have. They were it's in Phuket, but it's just on the north side, and they have this like private beach that there's like just gorgeous and there's nobody there. It's like, I'm like, how is this possible? I mean, I grew up in Jersey,
Wow.
so like there's no spot in New Jersey where you can go to a nice beach where there's nobody
Mhm.
there. There's always
Yeah.
somebody there, and a lot of somebody's. So yeah, some of that stuff is
Huh.
just it's just gorgeous.
Is there a quote that you live by?
Mm. Um, Not one in particular that I can think of, but yeah,
Maybe
there's
philosophy, a quote of
yeah.
philosophy.
Well, I think the one thing that I really try to focus on is like everything happens for a reason, and it's not,
Mhm.
it's up to us to figure out what that is and to make sense of it, to not like get sucked into, oh, that's so bad, this happened to me. Oh, poor me. But
Mhm.
you know, there's I look at it like God, the universe kind of uses things to
Mhm.
help. Sometimes, those tough times can lead to some of the best things that you would have never known if you didn't wind up in that spot, to get out of your comfort zone and to really, I mean, I think that's the other part of it too, like stay out of your comfort zone. Just don't be
Mhm.
afraid to like just walk out into something you really, that sometimes like have no business doing.
Yeah.
Perhaps for me renovating airstreams, but
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's funny. It's coincidentally my kind of quote that I live by. Everything happens for a reason. And I've realized this is kind of an unrefined thought, but if you believe that everything happens for a reason and let's say something happens and then you don't know what that reason is, something bad happens, you don't know the reason and you don't figure that out for a while. If you believe that everything happens for a reason, it's a lot easier to accept your situation, because complaining and all of that, it's not going to get you anywhere anyway.
you're
So if you can believe that everything happens for a reason, at least uh you can you know eliminate that aspect of unproductivity, just like giving yourself an excuse to not do something that you should be doing, or giving you know so that's kind
exactly.
of what I've like my experience of that quote, I guess.
In a way, it's like, you got to choose. The only that you can't choose what happens. The only thing you can choose is your reaction to it. And how
Hmm.
do I use this? And that's it, right? It's the same thing. It's like, how do I take this crappy thing that happened and how do I use it for my own good? To not, because you can
Hmm.
sit there and you could choose suffering. You could choose to like, woe is me, this sucks, blah 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 blah. And but what's the point? You can't go back in
Yeah.
time. You can't change it. It happened. So what am I going
Yeah.
to do about it? Don't dwell on it, but what am I going to do? How am I going to bring this forward?
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
No, I love that. That seems like
Not
a
easy to
gr-
do, but
yeah,
if you
not
can pull it
easy,
off, it's
not easy at
fantastic.
all. Yeah. For a little bit of context to this story. So I was in a place where I was seeing like people similar to me. I had an injury, like a spinal cord injury, and I was in this place, this rehab center where a lot of people are very sour, and it was so hard to see. And I've always had the everything happens for a reason mindset since I think it was 2015 or 2017. Um, but ever since then, I've always believed that, and so my recovery went a lot better. My recovery went better than anyone that I've ever I was in contact with in that facility, and yeah, it was crazy to see how you know how negative some people were, and you know that idea of um negativity breeds hopelessness. And when that happens, it's like, it's hard for anyone to, put in the extra effort to work on something,
Yeah.
you know, do extra rehab or whatever the case may be, that could be the little bit that you need to do the next, like an additional rep the next time. So
Yeah, that stuff
I
is
love,
not easy. I mean,
mm-mm.
thankfully I haven't had much of that myself, but my mother had a bad fall and wound up in a coma and had to learn how to walk
Oh
again and all
my,
that. And it's
yeah.
places are tough, and like you said, it's having that faith to like I'm gonna do this because your body, I think,
Mhm.
listens to whatever
Yeah.
you're saying. Like that Henry Ford, I think it's Henry Ford quote. All right, I forgot the quote.
That's
Uh,
that's okay.
something about like whatever you tell yourself it would do or
Whether you can or you can't, you're
yeah,
right.
yeah, that one.
Okay.
That one, whether you can or you can't, you're right.
Whether you think you can or you
That's
can't.
it.
Yeah,
That's
something
it.
like that.
Yeah, no matter what, you're right. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of what are you telling yourself in this moment? Do I think I can
Mhm.
do it or do I not? Because like you said, if you don't think you're gonna do it, then like, well, why am I gonna do one more rep? Screw it.
Yeah,
Worthless. I'm stuck
exactly.
forever. Hopeless.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you're gonna be. Your body's not gonna change on its own. So
Yeah, having that faith to get through that is tough, but man,
yeah.
if you have that, you can do almost anything. It's
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's a very interesting time, and I'm sure your mother experienced the same thing. A lot of those same things. So yeah, well that seems like a great spot to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming on. Before we go, where can people, find you? Let's say someone's in the Jersey area, they want to do business with you. How do they do that?
yeah, I'm on send you the link. I don't remember off the top of my head. I
Mhm.
have a couple different ways to there's gregghasenfus.com. There's Instagram is a good way to find me as well, or through Compass, or if they want to book an Airbnb for Airstream, we'll send you the link for those as well. And
Yeah,
Max, man, thanks so much, man. I really,
yeah, of
really enjoyed
course.
the talk, and it's really cool getting to know you. It's a lot of
Yeah, yeah, thank you again. So you can send me all of those links. I'll put those in the description. And for everyone watching, if you could, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, comment what you want to see in the future. That would be great. So once again, Greg, thanks for coming on. It's been a blast.
Thank you, man.